even in little things where you say, well, at this point in time I could go and visit somebody in hospital, but it's raining, and I could watch television, and anyway, they probably don't see me all that much. And you think of all sorts of reasons, but that's a choice of evil. And it might be a little thing, and you're not actually torturing anybody, but you're just choosing something which is less compassionate. I think that is evil. For most of us, evil doesn't seem very great because we don't have much power. But if you put us into government or into positions of power, that can lead to catastrophic consequences.
The history of seeing the face of evil is the history of trying to avoid responsibility. It used to be the devil or the atavistic degenerate. Today it's more likely to be the face on the front of a newspaper, a serial killer or terrorist. But I'm left with Peter Jay's description of Dennis Nilsson as worryingly normal. That's what's so frightening about the search for the face of evil. It's the face of the man in the next street, the woman next door, when they make the wrong choice, the selfish choice. It's your face or mine.
Coming up on Four Men, at the sharp end of World War II bomb disposal, recall life-threatening moments and the battle of wits between them and the Germans, who developed more and more ingenious devices. Danger.
Here, look at my finger and follow it with your eyes.
Jonathan Pincus is a neurologist, a doctor who deals with the physical structure of the brain. Over the past 25 years, he's examined over 150 of his country's most notorious murderers.
Okay, so take your right hand and do this with me.
Standing up or?
No, right there.
Okay.
Hit with your thigh. Put your thigh up. Just relax. Palm, fist, side. Palm.
He's come to the surprising conclusion that in nearly every case, they suffered from three quite separate conditions: a history of severe childhood abuse, severe mental illness, and damage to the brain, in particular to the part of the brain that Pincus has made his speciality, the frontal lobes.
You did it perfectly.
Okay.
But what people with frontal lobe disease will do is to get the sequence wrong.
How does frontal lobe damage affect behaviour?
Well, it makes people have a shorter fuse, for example, when they get angry. People may talk too loudly. They may stand too close. They can't understand the effect that they're having on other people, and they don't care.
How would this damage have come about?
Well, I think that most of the people that I have seen who have been in custody for murder have had prenatal exposures to factors that are harmful. Then there's abuse itself. You don't often get a history of it, but the shaking of little babies is very common. That causes tears and hemorrhages within the brain. Slapping and punching of children, throwing them against walls. Some of the abuse that have been experienced by murderers that I've examined has been startling. This is not within the ordinary range of human experience. This is extraordinary.
Aren't people who are accused of serious crimes likely to use abuse as an excuse?
If they were rational and clear-thinking as you and I are, yes, but they aren't. And in all of my career, and I've seen perhaps 150 murderers who were on death row or about to go onto death row, I've only seen one who credibly fabricated a story of abuse. It was denied by every single member of his family. The fabrication has gone the other way in most cases. Only a third will, if you say, were you abused, will the people say yes and then detail it. In the other two-thirds, they have said no, and I have had to determine that they were abused from family members, brothers, sisters, friends, school reports, medical reports, police reports.
Does this bring us into a kind of excuse culture where people who've done bad things can say they were abused?
In America, we have a death penalty, and executing someone for an act for which he may not have been fully responsible, because abuse is not something that he had any control over, mental illness is not something he has a control over, and neurologic damage is not something he has much control over either. I think is excessive, and I think is unwarranted in most cases. To give the death penalty to some abused, retarded individual who breaks into a 7-Eleven convenience store, shoots the clerk, and runs out having forgotten to take anything. That doesn't seem to me to be a very appropriate use of the death penalty.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
In 1978, the mayor of San Francisco and his assistant, Harvey Milk, were shot dead by an ex-cop, Dan White. In a bizarre decision, the jury found Dan White not guilty of murder, after lawyers used White's consumption of junk food, in particular a kind of pre-packaged cake called a Twinkie, as evidence that White was not responsible for his actions. The argument became known as the Twinkie defence, and it was joined by a whole string of mitigating arguments that came flooding off the American legal production line.
Average citizens have consumed more than 40 billion Twinkies.
Black rage syndrome, chronic lateness syndrome, fan obsession syndrome, and happy gay sailor syndrome.